Now, 1 foot off center.
And now it's on, gonna blow your mind.
Rick Maddison, host of 1 Foot Off Center, where we discuss issues from both sides of the political fence. Brought to you by Jennifer Maddison of Remax, keys in hand, deals on deck, hustle and heels. What do you expect?
That's a rhyme.
Wasn't that good?
That was good.
So
6 out of 10, but I like the effort.
So at the Sod Landscaping, thank you to the gang for helping a Project Literacy with the landscape job. Didn't want any recognition, of course, but you got it anyway. Good community citizens. Now your panel. We got Scott Lanigan, lead pastor of Trinity Church. Trinity, for all of your churching needs. Jeff Cox of Simply Benefits. What do they do? It's in the name. Mattiussi, former CEO of Kelowna, makes a mean flatbread pizza.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, first, I just want to talk a bit about this. There's a fellow in the community, I'm not going to name his name, but very vocal about Airbnb, about the rules, suggesting we've kind of missed the bus. I think there's a bit of a chat going on with Victoria about relaxing the rules for Airbnb. We have a lot of inventory coming on stream in Kelowna, and I know that that's changing the appetite, some could say. So I don't know where we sit on the old fence for Airbnb rules, but Scott, do you have in your eyes, do we need to get going quicker with relaxing the rules? Because we do have a World Cup, FIFA World Cup coming to Vancouver. We also have this thing called a Memorial Cup, which is, I think, April or May. And so now all of a sudden we have a big demand on our city. So where do you sit with the Airbnb rules?
I've seen it most poignantly within the wedding industry. So we're a destination wedding industry. We do hundreds upon hundreds of wedding licenses, marriage licenses every season, kind of from April through to October. So I did my last wedding here this year, last weekend, and to a person, family, with all the people coming here, trying to find a place to stay is so difficult, especially in the hot seasons of June, July, and August. And when those rules changed, it dramatically impacted that for individuals just trying to come find, and these individuals are choosing the Okanagan for a destination. They're choosing to invest dollars here. And so the dollars are just waiting there for individuals to take on. And what I hear more often than not is people that know somebody that will give them a condo that isn't on Airbnb and allow them to stay there, as opposed to where in previous years they were able to find Airbnb, no problem. They were able to invest. They were able to spend the money. And so I think something has to change. And then, with, as we were talking about before coming on here, with the amount of potential units coming online, it's only going to create more tension, and I think it has to change, and I think it needs to be thought of from the destination, from the vacation, from the tourist individual's perspective, not just from the local community.
I heard during this last year's Briar, that there were 6 people in hotel rooms, like just people on top of each other, just because they couldn't make it work any other way. Mm-hmm. And I've heard tournament directors actually talk about softball tournaments, hockey tournaments, where instead of getting 8 teams or 12 teams, they get 3 or 4 because the teams are going, well, some of the players just can't afford to be here. Jeff?
I think first and foremost, the key here is that it's not a provincial decision. That's excessive overreach from my perspective. I don't think the province has any stance or say in what cities do. From a standpoint of whether they do or do not approve Airbnb. I think it's a city. I think it's a city decision, and I would probably go further. There's been talk about city council doing, reform to effectively geographical representation. So if you're from the South Mission, you would elect one candidate. If you're from Rutland, you would elect one candidate, which again, I think would allow it to be done at a neighborhood level. So there are pros and cons to Airbnb, and by nature a capitalist, and think that there needs to be rules around the engagement of Airbnb, but obviously have used it, respect it, think it works well. If I owned or was someone living in a condo building and the suite next to me was an Airbnb suite and people came in at 4:00
Right.
every weekend and partied, I'd probably be against it. So you have to I understand that perspective, but those are solvable problems that can be done at a city level. Now, should Airbnb be allowed in my neighborhood? I don't know. I mean, as a homeowner, I would say, yeah. I mean, you would like the advantage if you had a suite that you could rent it possibly and make more money. But I understand the other side of it. But I can tell you, it's not for the province to be weighing in on. Those are questions though that need to be asked, and they should be done at a city level. And again, knowing your councilor's stance or your mayor's stance on it would make sense. It's somewhere in between, like everything else. Now, to the challenge that we've had, you are a tourist city. We've been a tourist city since before I was on this earth, and we have excessively moved to the destination spot for most Canadians, especially over the last 18 months with what's happened south of the border. So, at the exact same time that happens, we don't have Airbnb.
Right.
We don't have a plethora of great hotel options. We don't have any real family-oriented hotel options. The motor inns of the city have gone to the wayside for condos mostly. It's just so Canadian for us to take away all the places to stay and then ban Airbnb. Like it's the Canadian way, and then go, hey, how'd we get here? Right? I do not believe it's a basic answer, because I think there's lots of complications to Airbnb. So I understand why people would have challenges and be against it. And if there was one located next to me, I'd probably be in that camp. Do we need these? Do we need the rooms? Yes. Do we need it to support tourism? Yes. The irony, Ron, you brought this up at one point. We have buildings that were built for Airbnb, and we've not let them continue to operate. Yeah. The Shore, across from the El Dorado, Playa del Sol. Like I'd start there. Would be the first place, and then you got to move at a conservative pace to say we are going to allow it in other areas.
Because I think for me, 2010 Olympics was a great way for the world to see that region. Like it was a great. Like they're going to stay for the Olympics, they're going to see a bit of the city and go, wow, this is an incredible gem. And I think we have a big opportunity. World Cup is probably even one of the biggest sports events to hit, BC, I think. And then you also have Memorial Cup, which is another way to showcase our city. And yet, I think a lot of these changes may not come into effect until after the Memorial Cup is actually past us, and it's into June and July. So, but Ron, you've seen this whole evolution over your time.
Yeah, I just wanted the pleasure of saying I disagree with Scott and I agree with Jim. No. First and foremost, when you look at the issue, there were two issues driving this. And one that got sort of forgotten because of the whole rental issue is that, there's no rental, but we have short-term rental, and it's putting pressure on people who have to try to rent to live here. So the person working at Starbucks can't find a place to rent. So that was the issue, the problem I think they were originally trying to solve. For many, many years, I saw the other problem. That goes back to Jeff's point. I remember getting a call, of many calls actually, from someone up in not Magic Estates, one of the other neighborhoods up there, because the building next door is being rented. And he said, look, I have to get up in the morning, I have kids, and I got to put up with Calgarians partying in the hot tub till 3 a.m. every night, golfing and then partying. Well, I don't think anybody so thinking of citizens first, I don't think anybody that buys a house in a single family neighborhood should have to put up with that. Now, are there ways to deal with it? Yes. And so I think where we really have to get to, and I agree, I mean, there were condos in this city that were zoned commercial expressly for the use when they were put that in for that kind of use. And I think that's the solution. When you get into the single family neighborhoods, I get a little concerned. And maybe those areas could be subject to a rezoning or something where I think it's really important that people know the rules. If I make a big investment in my home, I want to have some surety that it doesn't become a commercial hotel next to me.
Yeah.
But I think those are all, I think you can work them out, and I agree with you. I think that type of decision is best made at a local level. And then if it has to be, then through some sub areas. But the trickiest issue, I think, is single family. Condos, not an issue. If you buy in, some of the buildings, some of the towers downtown, you knew that those things are created to be that. So when people are partying next to you, well, that's you should have done your due diligence, because there are other buildings. I live in Centuria. No, they don't allow it. They never allowed it. They won't allow it. So we don't have that problem.
I see a bit of the hoteliers saying, like, listen, we have to follow these rules to make sure that, there's fire suppression, there's fire extinguishers, there's, we have all these structures which cost money to provide. And on the Airbnb, they can not have a fire extinguisher if they so choose. Like, there's different insurance requirements for a hotelier than there would be for Airbnb. So I do feel for them in that sense.
It's kind of the almost the same argument that happened with taxis and Uber. I mean, if you had a taxi license, you were paying big bucks for that license, and then Uber comes along and why am I a taxi driver? So I think there's going to be the same sort of transformation that has to occur in that side. From a municipal experience, I mean, I think they'd be lovely to be able to tax people at a higher level.
But you did. So there was 2 points. Like Scott brought up a really good point that things move to the black market. So it's there. So that one, it becomes unregulated. 2, you have no tax base. The next part that Ron brought up that's true is the rules. So again, now you have a tax base on it, and now you can create rules. So empower. This is not an RCMP issue. So empower bylaw to stop ticketing parking in front of my house and start ticketing Airbnbs.
I think that's one of the One Foot Off Center's traditions.
It is, isn't it?
Is to talk about the bylaw ticketing Jeff's house. Yeah.
But here's the thing: go to Palm Springs, California, and you, if you've never rented an Airbnb in Palm Springs, California, there is a declaration that you sign, and it says, if you play music outside, not at a certain level, it's just if you play music outside and there is a complaint and it is proven, you're gone.
Yep.
So,
love it.
So you
love
can,
it.
You can solve the problem, and we already have empowered staff to do it, and we've now got a tax base that can help fund that. As long as we can come up with the solutions, I think you've got to open it up.
Yeah, I agree.
But I want to speak to the investor side of things. So, would you, in the current state, and it's very fluid with a provincial government, would you invest in an Airbnb or some domicile that could be Airbnb based on the moving goalposts here? Because, I mean, like I said, there's been buildings sometimes take 3 to 4 years to build, and the goalposts change while people had already invested. So, Scott, would you invest in an Airbnb?
To me, if that's your end game and it's a 3 to 4 year process, that's a dangerous game. I think you have to be more creative about how you can use that space. I think there's even a larger need for, if we want young professionals or young families to live in the valley, that there has to be creative solutions about spaces that are multifamily, that are in a single family household. Like, so you can use the space for a kid to move in with their, it's the sweet idea. But, there's also bed and breakfast. I got friends that do bed and breakfast, and they know that the taxable rate from a federal perspective is 30 grand, so they keep it under 30 grand, so they don't have to charge GST. Okay. But there's a bit more onus to take care of your space because there's a bed and breakfast aspect, which is inherently a way of kind of control that's part of it. So I think if you invest knowing that there's multiple options, it's worth it. But if you're just hoping for it's going to be just Airbnb, I think that would create some hesitation.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, would you invest?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't invest in anything in this province that David Eby could touch, and it's why people are fleeing like the entire province is on fire. Yeah, it's the truth.
Just through that red meat, right?
I was talking about Kelowna, but no.
Listen, it's until you have a plan. And I would argue that people that made investments or were currently running as Airbnbs would have a class action lawsuit against the province in any other scenario, except except in this province where it would never see the light of day. I wouldn't. Now, there's people that want to make money at it, I understand, and they're good at it. There's people that run Airbnbs for a living and they're good at it, that run respected businesses that don't get complaints, and they're probably the ones that should be doing it. I personally think it's way too early to say you're going to make an investment in something like that, of that nature right now. It's too volatile.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there was a very small segment that were following the rules and the way the rules were constructed. It's speculation. You took a chance. I mean, if you bought a house, single-family dwelling in a single-family neighborhood, and then you just started renting it out, well, then I don't have a lot of sympathy for you, right?
No, but if you bought in Playa del Sol
absolutely.
or Aqua, or that's more my focus.
I agree. I mean, those are the guys that really have a beef. Absolutely.
They have legs to stand on to say we made investments in something that was being promoted that way and was being promoted that way legally.
Yeah.
That's where I think there's a stance. I'm with you. I mean, if you bought a single family home and you were hoping to Airbnb it, well, yeah, it's a risk you're on.
Yep.
So.
Let's park that for a second.
Okay.
Further to Jeff's point, which is a fun one. Do we think David Eby is like, he may or may not call a snap election, but what's his report card? Like if you were to give him a report card for his tenure thus far, what would you give him, an A, B, C, or D, Ron?
That's a tough one, because I'd give him, in terms of trying to tackle some of these problems, I'd certainly give him a B for effort. Do I like what he's done, in particular for local government, in terms of coming in with a heavy, I mean, in this country, zoning, the notion that a local government is the final arbiter of zoning, even the courts won't touch zoning unless you've created an error in due process, or unless you made an error. The courts won't say, oh, geez, that was a dumb rezoning. Why'd you do that, council? The courts have recognized that local governments, that is their right. That's
their realm.
That's their realm. And so, stepping into that realm is pretty shocking. And he's not the only one who did it, by the way. Ontario, Doug Ford, the other end of the spectrum, did it too. So these government, but I actually do think that some of those actions were pretty draconian. Now, as I said before, you don't have a housing crisis and then do nothing like we did for the last 15 years. Maybe you don't like what he did, and most people, certain local governments didn't. But at the end of the day, I'll give him a B for effort. On the other fronts, I really can't judge it one way or another. I think he's operating as an NDP government would operate in most cases. Mm-hmm. They have a constituency, and I think he believes. I think one of the problems I see that's happening is the even further erosion, which is occurring everywhere at every level of government, of once upon a time you had ministers who helped shape legislation, and you had senior bureaucrats in those departments that worked there for 30 years. Now you have a hand-picked bunch of people that the premier, picked the former mayor of Victoria to be a housing advisor. Well, I'm not quite sure what she, what actually gave her the credentials to do that.
Nothing. Absolutely, and that was the criticism.
Yeah. So one of the things I do have some concern about is, he seems to act very unilateral on most things that he deals with, not necessarily, it seems, in consultation with the ministers or people duly affected. So I would say that would be my biggest criticism, not so much the pieces of what he's doing, but how he's doing it.
Go back to you in a second, Jeff, because I'm excited about this.
I'm so excited. You want it. Yeah, that's right.
But what about on the
You mocked my notes.
Decriminalization? How is he doing on that front?
On decriminalization, Rick, I wrote here that,
Well,
it's
past chair of Journey Home.
That's right. It's not the GDP. It's not optics. It's this. How will this change a person's Tuesday? I said their Tuesday. If people start feeling change in the everyday, trust follows. And I said I think people want to believe the government cares and that want to believe they're doing the right thing, but care has to show up in their daily life. So when rent or groceries or healthcare wait times keep climbing, it's hard to feel the benefit even if programs exist on paper. So policy is only successful when people can point to a real change in their week, not just a headline. And I think that's the thing that people are looking for in our province. I'm like, I don't want a headline. You've talked about decriminalization. You've talked about these things, but what's the change for me? How's my Tuesday look different? And I think for so long, my Tuesdays looked exactly the same or worse on a number of fronts. And I at what point does the frustration just boil over to just a lack of care? And I think as Jeff noted, people are like, forget it, I'm out, and I'm going somewhere else because of it, and it happens to be the province over. And decriminalization has had such a detrimental impact in a far greater scope than I think anybody understands. And it's not even necessarily the folks on the street that we see every day. It's the the lawyer at home at night. It's the businessman in a hotel room on a travel, because they're coping. They just cope in a different way, and I think that's the thing that actually has a greater impact that we can't even see.
So you're gonna give him a grade or no?
I'd be with Ron, not because I'm not wanting to, but it's a B-.
1 foot off center right here, Jeff.
This will balance it out.
Yeah, this will help.
Listen, I'm gonna preface it with a couple of things. I not the same, but here's the thing. Mr. Champagne rolled out the third largest deficit outside of pandemic in Canadian history today. And even with that said, I fundamentally disagree with that. I'm sleeping at night knowing that there's an adult running this country, and I'm sincere about that. Listen, I've always said I'm like a liberal of 1998. You know what I mean? Like I would love to have Jean Chrétien back, choking someone out trying to get to his car. Mm-hmm. Those were the days, and so. Because I'm not one-sided. I'm actually comfortable with where we are today with our leader. I mean, he brought along too many of the clowns from that 10 years of chaos, but I think he's slowly going to watch that disappear. So I'm comfortable where we're at a federal level. I don't think change happens overnight, and to clean up 10 years of mess will probably take 30. Now, move to this province. Again, sincerely, rest in peace. I didn't have a problem with John Horgan, especially at the start. I thought John Horgan was a pretty legit guy who was very sincere and had the right ideas. I'm not quite obviously an NDPer, but it doesn't mean that he's evil. Right. It means that him and I have different opinions on the way things should be. NDP ideology, you can even look at it and say, well, that makes sense. It just never principally applies quite well. At least that's my take. But I don't think John Horgan was a bad guy. David Eby is failing on every front right now, and that's the challenge. Like, again, I'm sure David Eby has the best intentions when he gets up in the morning. I really, really do believe that. I don't think he's a bad human being. Healthcare is failing because of bureaucracy. Housing is failing. Like, listen, we could do 10 podcast shows on decriminalization. Again, did she navigate us through a period of time? Yes. Bonnie Henry is long past due. David, do yourself a favor. She has got views the province is not aligned with. It's time to replace her. Like, there are a number of things. I don't know what he's doing right. Every time I turn around and he gets slapped with something, it's never his fault. It's the federal government's fault. I mean, I heard him blame the Liberals. No, the provincial Liberals. And I was doing the math. Like, were they in power? Wait a minute. I was a child when you know what I mean? I'm like, how is he doing this? So I can't give him a passing grade because I can't find that piece that works. I think he's used Trump incorrectly. Listen, I think that has caught up with Doug Ford too, right? Doug Ford was folksy and your buddy, and I think Doug Ford's days are now numbered based on what's happened, and that's where I actually give Mark Carney credit. Like, Mark Carney has moved us back to this, what we like to be proud of as Canadians, and it's a reserved, it's quiet, it's strong. We're going to get through this. Like I somehow, through the media, I've never met the man, have actually gained a trust in him, because he's been principled, he's not been quiet, but he's not been outspoken. He's stuck to the messaging. They despite this budget being a little bit crazy, they did find they've done some of the right things. On a provincial level, though, like, I can't say that. I don't know where they've succeeded. I've watched them place blame. And John Horgan didn't do that, for the record. And that's been very much a David Eby thing. And I don't know. And again, it's bad decisions. Like, I mean, naming the ex-mayor of
Victoria.
Victoria. But that being said, I mean, Carney put Gregor Robertson in a very similar role. Speaking of ex-mayors. Speaking of people that failed epically, like, so who knows? But yeah, I can't give him a passing grade. And it's time for a change. And the problem is, I don't know what that change is, because short of 3 Conservative MPs, one of them fortunately being in a riding who I'm pretty comfortable with, and then maybe 2 or 3 others. I mean, no doubt he's like, I mean, when he came out this week and was like, I don't want an election, I'm like, you're so full of it. Yes, you do. Anybody would want an election if they were running against this disaster, right? So,
who's advising?
Who? Of course,
Yeah,
no,
even in the forestry sector, and that's the one I through the film BC is Burning. I'm hearing more about the forestry, and they are taking it on the chin, because there's been nothing to help with stumpage fees. There's been nothing about any kind of relaxation of regulations as far as just getting to the fiber. So there's a lot of companies out there suffering, and the NDP's going, well, and apparently at the UBCM, when mayors came with hat in hand saying, we have some ideas, some thoughts around this, we have no money. Like, that was the constant refrain heard at the UBCM. So I think the NDP is starting to realize, and healthcare is of course a conduit for all of those things.
But Rick, they're a pro-union party, and every union in this province is on strike right now. like how many times I like, if you owned a restaurant or restaurants in this province, they must wake up in the morning and think, where
what
are
else?
You kicking us today? Right? Like, just when we get out of it, by the way, you can't get liquor, and we don't see an end. It's like, these are, to your point, what affects my day? Right. Like, It is hitting too many people in their pocketbooks. It's hitting small business. Who's happy with them? I mean, their supporters are picketing.
Not people around the Cowichan area there.
Right.
Holy.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more. I was just going to say that, and it's what you're saying, at the federal level, it's built of trust, but good policy has to translate into peace of mind. And that's, I think, when that's working, and there's a peace of mind, then there's a feeling, a sense of like, hey, they hear me, they're listening. But when it can't, when it just keeps, like you said, the restaurateurs and stuff, like it rattles the foundation you stand on. And I think if it just continues and continues, and I don't know if it's even possible, and maybe Ron, you can speak to this a bit more too, but I don't even know if it's possible in our day and age for our present politicians not to be thinking about getting reelected, and that seems to be the driver as opposed to actually making real change happen. And often I feel is that they're just trying to get that next election cycle to be on their side.
I was just going to say that I think, listen, it's a notorious story that Pierre Trudeau and Joe Clark drank beer together on a regular basis, and they sat across the house from each other, and no doubt I was too young for it, but took jabs. I can see the history, but that's the other piece that we've got to get back to. This is not. I've had this epiphany based on stuff going on in the U.S. is like, we have got to figure that out. And I sound like every other cliche, but I'm serious. Like, at what point at any level of government, not municipal so much, but at a provincial level or at a federal level, are we going to be able to start realizing what we're trying to do here? And that's govern, not gotcha, and we're now in, right? Like that should be what Canadians at a grassroots are saying we want. Like, I don't know if I need the photo off of Pierre and Carney drinking beer, but it'd make me feel a little bit better that maybe they're working towards something. And I do feel at a federal level that maybe that is happening more behind closed doors than we know. It's not happening provincially. We know that for sure.
I'm not trying to belabor the point, but I think you're so right, Jeff, because what are we telling the next generation? That if we can't be grown-ups and just talk, unity does not mean uniformity. It just means unity. It doesn't. It means I can have a differing opinion, but actually can be a human being, and we can actually go towards a greater goal together rather than trying to tear each other apart. And I think it's missing so much in our society at a municipal level, provincial level, and federal level, and to have more people act like grown-ups to go, hey, I can completely disagree. And I think you're right. Carney's been doing that with Trump. Like they don't agree on a lot of things, but he's like, hey, we can be bigger people here. We can talk as humans and as respectful, and it doesn't mean we have to be uniform in what we're believing. And I just feel for all our kids and the next generation looking up and like, are we modeling this, or are we just modeling a much more divergent, attack-prone perspective?
I just feel like the amount of deficits we're piling up during our generation, I think the crash position in the airplane is what the next generation should do, because the deficits are huge, and we can't keep printing money. Inflation is the thing. Ron,
maybe if we opened up Airbnbs.
Ron,
just as a thought. It was a thought.
Love to hear your opinion on that land title thing, but I understand the Cowichan thing.
Yeah. We're moving into that.
Well,
now?
I just wanted to hear it because I know people are still hanging on to the old dial here. It's going, I wonder if they're going to go there.
Yeah. Well, I think this story goes way, way back, and this story goes way, way back to, could be, the governor of the province before it was a province, and goes back to the time where they never entered into treaties. I mean, it's as simple as that. Every other province in the country, Alberta has many treaties, and we don't have treaties in BC, and it was a decision that was made. It wasn't by accident. Somebody made the decision. And, and since that time, and probably the landmark decision, it was Justice Berger, but the Governmental decision, basically was the first that said, recognized that first off, there's no treaty. They never gave up their land to the Crown like they did everywhere else. So you could argue a lot of things, but in fact, right next door, they did. They have rules. You may not like the treaty, but they had one. And so the courts, and if you believe that in the rule of law, and the courts, based on all the evidence, that, they never gave up the rights. And it started the notion of Aboriginal title. Now, being Canadian courts, nobody really defined what that meant, but they recognized that and the problem with Aboriginal title is that, if you're in the Revelstoke area, there's lots of different groups claim, they overlap. So it's not like our notion of a lot. I mean, it's where they may have hunted in the winter, in the summer they were over here, they fished over there. So over time, in a whole series of court cases, it's been just drummed in more and more that there is such a thing. And so we've gone from the need to consult to the point where it's more than just consulting. Consulting isn't, oh, by the way, we're going to blow up that mountain, make a mine there. Now it's like, no, like, we got to work this out. What's going to be the impact? And so it's been this continuum. So in the Cowichan case, essentially what the Cowichan people have proven, because remember, they're on the island. They're fighting with the Musqueam too, right? I mean, they fish in the mouth of the river at Richmond, and proved that they in fact were there. And they had records from the colonial time saying, yeah, they were there. They talked about this being a village, that they were there. So I think the problem we have is the courts have gone down this path. The point, though, that I think people are kind of missing is nobody's yet defined what does that mean, and what does that mean vis-a-vis titled land. To this point, titled land is still takes precedent. Aboriginal title has never been defined that far down. So the case is a landmark case that'll, they'll be talking about for a long time, in my opinion. And the thing that worries me is that if you're really worried about Cowichan, you should have been worried about Gelgamuk. That's where the ball started moving down this road. So I now look and I see, the mayor of Richmond and stuff, and I know people are frightened, and why wouldn't you be? But I don't think this matter is going to be solved anytime soon. I think the courts have always taken another step or looked at it, but really even haven't clarified this. I think they've clarified some things, and a lot of the decisions, like the province has to do certain things. The deals with the province, but never impacting private rights, private citizen rights. So I think in this particular case, there's more obligation on the part of the province. So if there's provincial land there today, then the province might not have been able to sell it without permission of the First Nation or negotiating with the First Nation. So I think the jury's still out on what it actually means. I worry that, and I can see why people are doing it. I can really empathize with them. But I worry that there's no quick answer here. And, that's simple as that. We live in a lawful society. If I took your land and ended up with it, and you never sold it to me, we had no agreement, and 20 years later, you prove it's your land, what do you do?
Right.
And I'm simplifying the problem, but that's the problem. It all started the fact we never had treaties. We never clarified this like every other province did, and they still have their problems with the treaties, but we don't even have that. And so it's going to be a time of transition, and there's going to be lots of uncertainty. And my heart goes out to people who bought their house and lived their ordinary life and now have a cloud over their heads. So does that sum it up for you?
Yeah, that was great. Well, I'm sure we have listeners even till now, because one of our longer 1 foot off the center. This is good. We'll take let's just cut her down there. But Scott Lanigan, Jeff Cox, Mattiussi, I'm Rick Maddison. Thank you again for watching and listening.